Hey guys, my name is Sean Schoenmakers and I'm a business coach with Action Coach. I'm here at the Garland Chamber, and when I work with small business owners, I typically work with them on many different aspects of their business. But today we're going to be focusing on time management as well as your marketing and lead generation. So when we look at time management, which we actually call time mastery, there's three main areas that we look at within that subject, and that is self-mastery, planning mastery, and delegation mastery. When we start delving into self-mastery, one of the questions we really want to ask ourselves is, do we know where our time is going? So some of the questions like how many hours per day and how many hours per week are you currently working? One of the questions we want to ask ourselves. Also, what are the bigger chunks of the activities that you're doing, and when are you doing them, on what days? And then also, for how long? So whatever the chunks are, whether it's marketing, sales, working with your team, for how long are you working on these chunks? Is it 2 hours? Is it 10 hours? These are the types of questions we really want to understand. What is our time? What are we spending our time on, and when is it happening, and for how much? So once we get that understanding, then we can use a tool which we call our time target, and then we can use this to really understand whether we're using that time effectively. So two specific aspects that we look at when we try to figure out whether our time is being used effectively is we look at whether the activity is urgent versus not urgent, and we also look to see whether it's important versus not important. So when we look at urgency, we want to say, for example, does it have to be done within the next week? So if it has to be done within the next week, it might be an urgent task. If it doesn't have to be done within the next week, it might be not urgent. And in terms of importance, we want to know, is this activity going to move us positively towards our goals? And if it does, it's going to be an important task. If it doesn't move us towards our goals, it's going to be not important. So the first target, or the first zone of the target you can see here on the screen are those activities that are both not urgent and they're not important. So this is an activity that doesn't have to be done within the next week, and it's not going to move us towards our goal. This might be something like surfing the web or checking out different articles online. We typically know when we're in this zone, and this is actually called our distraction zone. And you can see there, we really want to target about 10% of our time to be in the distraction zone. We don't really want to spend too much time there, but it's okay to take some breaks and whatnot. So the next zone we look at are those activities that are urgent, so they have to be done, let's say, within the next week, but they're not important. They're not going to move us towards our goals. In general, this is our delusion zone. And again, we want to spend about 10% of our time in this zone as well. These might be activities such as some specific phone calls or some specific emails that maybe they have to be returned, but they're not going to move you forward in your goals, especially for your business. The next zone we want to look at are those activities that are urgent and they are important. So these have to be done within the next week, and they're going to move you positively towards your goals. These might be sending out invoices or doing the actual work or producing your product or service. These are the activities that are going to fuel your business, and we want to spend a good portion of time. You can see we want to spend about 60% of our time, and this is what we call our demand zone. This is a very important zone for our business. The last zone are those activities that are not urgent, but they are important. So they don't have to be done within the next week or so, but they're going to move us positively towards our business goals. These might be activities like planning, or they might be going to an educational seminar, things that are going to move you positively towards your goals, but they don't have to be done today or in the next week. We want to spend about 20% of our time in this zone, because if we don't, what's going to happen is those activities are actually going to become urgent versus not urgent. So we want to spend the time on those activities while we can before they become urgent and we have to do them. So those are the different aspects we want to look at when we look to see is your time being used effectively. The next section is our planning mastery. So when we look at planning mastery, you can see here one of the aspects we want to look at in planning mastery is, do we have a default calendar or a default schedule? So you can see here on the screen, this is an example of what could be a default calendar for you. So you want to say, okay, purposely putting in, what activities am I going to do Monday morning? From 9 to 10, am I answering emails? From 10 to 12, am I doing some lead generation? And we want to set that for not just Monday morning, but Monday afternoon, and then Tuesday morning and Tuesday afternoon. We want to have a pretty good, solid understanding for what our week's going to look like on purpose, right? So, and things might come up, and that might not stick exactly the same, but we want to have a plan for our week in general, and we call that a default calendar. So we always work with our clients to come up with a default calendar so that they can make sure that they're working on the activities they need to be working on for certain periods of time that they know are the correct portions of time. And the last thing we look at is delegation mastery. So some of the things we look at when we look at delegating our tasks, we want to see First of all, we want to take a quick time log and try to figure out, well, what are the activities that we're currently doing? So take a look back at your last week. What are the activities you're doing? From there, you can start to get an understanding of which of those activities should be delegated. After that, you want to look for the things that you're sort of doing that you sort of want to do, but you don't need to do. Definitely want to pay attention to those tasks because likelihood is if you don't need to be doing them, you probably shouldn't be. So those are some tasks that are probably going to be delegatable. And then the next thing we want to look at is you also want to carve out, we say at least 5 hours, about 5 hours of time to be working on your business. So that might be writing processes or planning out some different things for your business. We want to spend at least 5 hours a week on those activities. Also, understand that delegation is not just about your employees doing the work, but it's also about you as the business owner letting go. It's about trusting your employees, understanding that you can't do everything yourself and you need your employees to perform and do good work for you. One of the other things we want to look at is when you do delegate, we want to make sure that you're not abdicating. Okay, and the difference there is that if I just say, hey, we have this activity to do, go do it, that's abdication. I don't know how that task is going to turn out. But if I take someone and I say, hey, this is the task we need to get done, this is roughly how it needs to be completed, this is when it needs to be completed, that is giving much more information to the employee and they're going to be set up for success. That is true delegation. When we do that, we also want to make sure that we're training our employees, we're assisting them, especially there at the start, to make sure that they're not going to flounder and sort of go nowhere. And then last but not least, you really want to try to start by delegating the basics. You start by delegating the basics. Typically, they might be a little bit easier, and you build from there. So those are a lot of the different things we want to look at for delegation mastery. If we do all those things correctly, the planning mastery, the self-mastery, and the delegation mastery, then you really make some solid impacts on your time mastery and your time management. So what do we do with all this information? Now it's time to get into action.